Unfortunately for Bernie Sanders, his entrance into the Democratic primary race has looked more like the Kentucky Derby rather than a contest of ideals. And one can blame that mostly on the American media, who's desperate to have headlines, clickbait titles that pit Hillary Clinton against Bernie Sanders, to have Bernie Sanders on the record destroying Hillary Clinton, so to speak. A good example of this is a recent interview Bernie Sanders did with Katie Couric. One can note during the interview that Katie really wants Bernie to go on the attack, to go after Hillary Clinton. She's seeking those sorts of headlines. It's not necessarily a bad thing, it is a competition between two people. However, one notices that this predominates the rest of the interview, that she doesn't ask really about his policy positions, but rather, what is his issue with Hillary Clinton? But one thing is obvious, one thing the media is now taking into account is that Bernie Sanders is obviously tapping into an energy. He's obviously drawing big crowds, massive crowds of people everywhere he goes, with little to no planning. But his supporters and observers, rightfully so, are split as to whether he can actually beat Hillary Clinton in the nomination process. It's a reasonable question, and I think that even the feel the burn types know that it was always a long shot, that if Hillary Clinton does end up falling to Bernie Sanders, it will be nothing short of a miracle. I mean, after all, history is full of idealistic political candidates who ended up not being able to draw outside of their own little sphere of influence. I'm not saying Bernie Sanders is like that, but that's a topic for another day. Anyways, if you're a curious person, this video is for you. I'm going to try to treat Bernie Sanders as fair as I can, and in this part 1 of a series I'm doing on Bernie Sanders, I'm going to address his policy positions straightforward. So what does Bernie Sanders believe? What does his voting record look like? What has he said in the past? And what can we expect from him as president? Second, I'm going to look at, in part 2, where do he and Hillary Clinton differ on the policy issues? Maybe where is he a little bit more filled out in his policies, whereas Hillary Clinton is perhaps a little bit more vague. And in part 3, I'm going to look at, can Bernie Sanders actually beat Hillary Clinton? Is there some sort of historical precedent that says that an underdog like him can come and win? And then at some point I'd also like to talk about what is democratic socialism, what is the political ideology of Bernie Sanders, and does it have a place in American politics? So first, Bernie Sanders supports breaking up big banks on Wall Street. Too big to fail, too big to exist. He supports initiatives that would mandate maternity and paternity leave for parents. So he generally supports higher taxes, especially for the rich. That includes raising the capital gains tax, I believe, to fund free university education for everyone, and going after companies that hide tax money overseas, that avoid their taxes by putting them in places like the Bahamas and the Cayman Islands. So he's a big advocate also of workers' unions, public worker unions, I assume also private worker unions, like the proposed unions for workers of Walmart. He wants to make it easier, basically, for workers to unionize. Along those same lines, he's opposed to most free trade style agreements and sees them as detrimental to the American worker. The most recent, of course, being the Trans-Pacific Partnership proposal. He does believe that climate change is a man-made phenomenon and that carbon caps are necessary. He's opposed, however, to nuclear energy. One of his solutions to the joblessness rate, which he believes is well over 10%, the real unemployment rate, as he would call it, his solution would be the improvement of infrastructure, putting in a high-speed rail, for example, rebuilding bridges and roads. He was opposed to the 2002 authorization for force in Iraq, and he's opposed to the Patriot Act and to the related spying, including, of course, the infamous NSA spying. And he believes in free community college, free university education. Like I said earlier, he believes in levying taxes from microtransactions on Wall Street in order to pay for this. And probably the most impactful position of his, he's opposed to and supports overturning the Citizens United Supreme Court decision, which basically allowed unlimited spending in the political process from private groups in American politics. If you're interested in what Citizens United is and efforts to overturn it, check out the description below. One important thing to note is that Sanders is not accepting political donations from large corporations or support from super PACs during his run. The best thing about Bernie Sanders is that his positions are so straightforward, so we can go back 4 decades and see exactly where he stood on things, and it hasn't changed much since then. For example, here's a letter from 1972 in which Bernie calls for the end of prohibition on abortion, the end of the drug war, and the end on the sodomy laws and things that stopped homosexuals from engaging in their private bedrooms as they like. That's in stark contrast to Hillary Clinton, who as recently as 2008 was on the record saying that marriage to her was only between a man and a woman, which has conveniently changed just in time for the 2016 race. But let's hold off on that. We're going to go into that more into part 2. This was just kind of a teaser, an appetizer. I wanted you to see straightforward what Bernie's positions are. And going forward, we're going to see the highlighted differences between him and Hillary and his chances of winning. So stay tuned to the series. Check out the description below for the link to part 2, which I'll put up as soon as I can.